Rather, defendants always intended to obtain by whatever means necessary the fraudulent intellectual property assignment agreement which granted POW the exclusive right to use Lee's name, identity, and image and likeness, thus taking away the most important and prized possession Lee and his family owned his entire life. You stole my company. By the way, you also stole the contents of my office. So here it is. In the Superior Court of the State of California, Los Angeles County, Stan Lee versus POW Entertainment, a Delaware company, Gil Champion, Shane Duffy, and additional John Does. He seeks a declaratory judgment, rescission, fraud in execution, and conversion. Those are interesting things. We'll go over them a little bit more in detail, but a declaratory judgment is when you ask a judge to say something is true or not. You're not asking him to, or her, to give money damages on that particular claim. You're not asking them to order specific performance or order an injunction or court order to do something as opposed to paying money. You're just asking the judge to say, hey, yes, this contract is valid or invalid, or this copyright is valid or invalid. You see that a lot in copyright law where people ask, can we have a declaratory judgment that says my copyright is valid, so that these people who are saying they're going to sue, just they can't, they have to go pound sand. Then part 2 here, rescission would usually mean rescission of a contract. So if there's some kind of contract that needs to be rescinded. Fraud and execution, I'm guessing, has something to do with executing a contract. And then conversion is usually the conversion of property, which is a form of theft. So that's what I think we're going to be talking about here. So Stan Lee, of course, is the plaintiff. He's an individual residing in Los Angeles. He's 95 and creates iconic superheroes: Spider-Man, Iron Man, the Hulk, Thor, X-Men, the Black Panther, the Avengers. He is a American Hollywood executive producer, comic book writer, and former editor-in-chief and publisher of Marvel Comics, where he is now chairman emeritus. Lee is informed and believed, and based thereon alleges that defendants, and each of them, conspired and agreed to broker a sham deal to sell POW to a company in China and fraudulently steal Stan Lee's identity, name, image, and likeness as part of a nefarious scheme to benefit financially at Lee's expense. POW Entertainment, POW Inc., is a holding corporation. Pursuant to their conspiracy and agreement, defendants knowingly made material misrepresentations of fact and forged or fraudulently obtained a signature from Lee to give POW the exclusive use of Lee's identity, name, image, and likeness as described in further detail below. Defendants knew that their objective was unlawful, and they intended to aid each other in achieving that unlawful objective. As a result, Lee has suffered injuries. Given his fame and cultural importance as an American icon and living legend, there is a significant commercial interest in the use of his image, name, and likeness. Lee therefore has a long history of agreeing to non-exclusive licenses for the use of his name, image, and likeness. For example, Walt Disney, which paid $4 billion to buy Marvel, has a non-exclusive right to use Lee's name, image, and likeness in connection with the characters Lee created for Marvel, such as Spider-Man. In each instance in which Lee granted the non-exclusive license, the licensee has offered to pay a fee for the use of his name, image, and likeness, but under no circumstances did Lee ever sell off his personal identity, name, and likeness, which he spent 95 years building up. Lee was married to Joan B. Lee for 70 years until her death in late 2017. Upon her death, Lee, at age 94, became the target of various unscrupulous businessmen, sycophants, and opportunists who saw a chance to take advantage of Lee's despondent state of mind, kind heart, and devotion to his craft, a devotion that often allowed him to overlook the bad intentions of others when it came to his property. Duffy, the current CEO of POW, and Champion, Lee's former business partner, were two of these opportunists. Each of them knew about Lee's diagnosis of advanced macular degeneration, which left him unable to read or drive on his own since about 2015, and they preyed on his infirmities while he was in a state of despair. While Lee's beloved wife was on her deathbed, Lee was in a state of total devastation. Champion and Duffy, on behalf of POW, were brokering a deal to sell POW to Kamsing International Holding Limited, a Hong Kong corporation, and the controller of First Creative and Merger Sub. Duffy and Champion were incentivized to get a deal between POW and Kamsing done because each of them would benefit financially. They never disclosed the actual terms of the deal to Lee before closing it. Another unfortunate side effect of defendant's scheme to sell POW to Kamsing is that POW's shareholders are now suing Lee in connection with the sale terms to which Lee did not agree. Within a few days after Lee's beloved wife of 70 years passed away, while Lee was in great distress over this severe loss, certain individuals took great advantage of Lee. They fired his banker of 26 years. They fired his lawyers of many years and caused approximately $4.6 million to be transferred out of his Merrill Lynch account without his authorization. They bought a condominium for $890,000 and forged a check for $300,000 without Lee's knowledge. After many visits to Lee's home under the auspices of checking on his general well-being, Gerardo Olivares, a person Lee once trusted and who is being sued by Lee now for fraud, managed to convince Lee to sign a power of attorney to gain further and more precise control over Lee's assets. He also appointed his friend and associate Yuri Litvak, who was also Olivares' own lawyer, as Lee's lawyer, without disclosing to Lee their pre-existing financial and business relationships. In or around 2017, Duffy, Champion, and Olivares requested that Lee sign non-exclusive licenses with POW for his name, image, and likeness in connection with the creative works owned by POW for the purposes of a sale to Kamsing. Unbeknownst to Lee, defendants had no intention of obtaining a non-exclusive license for the creative works owned by POW and created by Lee for the purposes of the sale to Kamsing. Rather, defendants always intended to obtain by whatever means necessary the fraudulent intellectual property assignment agreement made as of September 28, 2017, the illegitimate document which granted POW the exclusive right to use Lee's name, identity, and image and likeness on a worldwide basis and in perpetuity, thus taking away the most important and prized possession Lee and his family owned his entire life. A true and correct copy of the illegitimate document is attached as Exhibit A. In addition, POW took control of Lee's personal social media accounts, including Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, thereby impersonating Lee before a combined 15 million followers worldwide. Lee does not recall anyone reading the illegitimate document to him, and due to his advanced macular degeneration, he could not have read it himself. Lee does remember one of his advisors reading him a non-exclusive agreement with POW regarding his identity, name, and likeness, and Lee believes he still has a copy of that document. If someone had read the illegitimate document to Lee, he would not have knowingly signed it. Lee has yet to provide anyone with the exclusive right to use his identity, image, name, and likeness. As discussed above, Lee did not even grant an exclusive license to his image, identity, name, and likeness to the Walt Disney Company in a multi-billion-dollar deal, let alone give his name and likeness away for free to a company in China. Moreover, he certainly would not have agreed to an exclusive license for no consideration, as set forth in the illegitimate document. Defendants knew all of this, which is why they had to obtain the illegitimate document unlawfully. Either Duffy, Champion, Olivares, or POW forged Lee's signatures, lifted Lee's signatures from another document, or induced Lee to sign the illegitimate document by using a bait-and-switch tactic by telling Lee it was something else. After learning of the document's existence, Lee demanded that POW provide him with copies. POW, through Duffy and Champion, advised Lee that he could obtain a copy by coming to POW's office to retrieve them. Once there, in the presence of several witnesses, Duffy and POW refused to hand over the fraudulent document they claimed Lee had signed. POW's excuse for not handing them over was they had to fix the document before providing copies to Lee. The illegitimate document contains telltale signs that they are not genuine. For example, the signature pages contain no substantive text, the name and title information for Stan Lee Entertainment Limited is not complete, there are no initials on any of the substantive pages of the illegitimate document. Let's see if they've attached it here at the end. So this is the allegedly illegitimate document, I believe. Here we go. Stan Lee shall and hereby does assign, convey, and grant to POW forever and irrevocably on a worldwide basis and in perpetuity all right, title, and interest that Stan Lee may have, commercial use of Stan Lee's name, including nickname, sobriquets, voice signature, photograph, image, and likeness. So that's in there. There's a bunch of other stuff. And if we go to the end here, yeah, there's the signature block is on the last page. And it appears all that had to happen was he had to sign this page, and he wouldn't necessarily have seen, like literally wouldn't necessarily have seen the other pages here. They would have had to have been read to him, and if they read him some other document and he simply signed where he thought he was supposed to sign, he can't read it for himself, so he depends on his agents. And so this is super weird, and it does look like it was kind of a power grab. Maybe they thought he was going to pass, and if he passed at the right time, then they would have a really easy time, or others would have a really hard time of fighting this if this was already done. But he hasn't passed, and he caught them, so yay. He seeks a judicial determination and declaration of validity and enforceability, or rather the invalidity and unenforceability of the illegitimate document and the parties' respective rights to use Lee's identity, name, image, and likeness. He asked for rescission. He did not knowingly execute the document. They either forged his signature, lifted his signature, or had him sign what he thought was another document. And he respectfully requests rescission because this whole situation's unconscionable, etc. He then asserts fraud in the execution. They told him it was something else and have committed fraud in the execution. And conversion, effectively stolen his personal effects. Oh, it's conversion in the sense that they stole the contents of his office by locking him out of his office, which includes valuable belongings, memorabilia, and collectibles. I'm sure it does. It's just an interesting thing that you tack onto the lawsuit. Like, you stole my company. By the way, you also stole the contents of my office. So that's super weird, and I hope if these things are true that Stan Lee gets vindicated, because this genuinely couldn't happen to a nicer guy. From what I understand, he's a super awesome dude, super cool guy, and genuinely, not sarcasm, couldn't happen to a nicer guy. So, yeah, let's follow this one and see what happens. Hopefully, if this is true, there should be criminal charges brought too, right? Trying to steal someone's company by making you're in a position of trust, right? Just like if I did that to a client, you would expect criminal charges brought against me. Same thing with Stan Lee. If they did that to him, I would expect criminal charges to be brought against them once the truth is out there and a prosecutor has some kind of information on that.
I think it's really shady to have someone sign such substantial and influential contracts right after their loved one has died. In general, that's a red flag to me. I don't know if I would want to sign any contracts, a few days after a loved one had passed.
And this is not the loved one part, but this is similar to what happened in Prenda Law. Different facts, different circumstances, but Prenda Law was the law firm. They were a copyright troll law firm who were prosecuting people for downloading videos without paying for them. And they discovered the BitTorrent file sharing things and all that, which we've discussed many times on this channel because that's what I do in my day job. Well, Prenda Law took shortcuts, really bad shortcuts. Instead of actually having copyrights, they had I think it was John Steele's gardener sign something and then used that signature on a copyright assignment document, which was the basis for a bunch of lawsuits. And eventually, I think that was all found out, and Prenda Law was undone, and John Steele was charged, and Paul Duffy died. He was an alcoholic. He had alcohol problems. I think his heart failed. There was a Paul Hansmeier in there. I think they were all charged and might be disbarred. I haven't really followed up with it since because who cares about those scumbags? But that was the same kind of thing. They presented a document to somebody and then either used the signature from it or had the signature page separate so that they could just use it with a different document. So thank you very much to Kareem Harper for your $500 contribution in May. Really appreciate that. Working on your Cambridge Analytica video. Have to get through DJ Gilcrease's Lexmark video, but that's pretty much done and we're ready to shoot that. So thank you very much for the $50 plus supporters: DJ Gilcrease, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Andy the Godslain, Kyle Mudrak, Eevi, Verement, Tayne, John H. Andersen, Sean McNamara, Michael Pearce, and William Gonzalez. And thank you to all the $5 plus supporters. Scrolling on the LED panel behind me, you'll be in the description of the videos that we post as well. And of course, all of the Patreon supporters get. You can ask me questions. You can post comments on our stories and everything, and we try to interact with you guys there, as well as a special channel on the Discord. So thank you for joining me. Have a great Sunday afternoon, evening, and a great week. Love you all.